The rain had begun in earnest by the time Mr. Jonathan Reeves reached the iron gates of Ashford Manor. The countryside was veiled in a misty drizzle, soft but persistent, and the great stone manor loomed at the end of the drive like something carved out of history itself. Reeves, a London solicitor in his late 50s, wasn't he one to enjoy country visits, but the invitation he had received bore the unmistakable seal of Sir Edmund Ashford. Sir Edmund was a man not easily refused. Wealthy, influential, and eccentric in equal measure, he had summoned Reeves along with a handful of others to his estate for what he mysteriously termed an important matter that cannot wait. As Reeves's car pulled up in front of the manor, the heavy oak door swung open, and the butler, Mr. Collins, greeted him with the solemn expression of a man who had seen far too many family squabbles to be surprised by any new development. "Good evening, Mr. Reeves," Collins intoned. "Sir Edmund is expecting you. Please, come in and make yourself comfortable in the drawing room." Inside, the manor exuded the peculiar charm of old English houses: high ceilings, walls lined with portraits of severe-looking ancestors, the faint smell of pipe tobacco mixed with polished oak. The fire crackled warmly in the hearth, though it did little to dispel the sensation of something colder lingering in the air. Already assembled in the drawing room were several figures who glanced up at Reeves as he entered. Lady Margaret Ashford, Sir Edmund's much younger second wife, sat elegantly in a velvet armchair, her fingers adorned with diamonds that caught the firelight. She gave Reeves a polite but cool smile. Across from her, leaning against the mantelpiece, was Edward Ashford, Sir Edmund's only son from his first marriage. Edward was in his mid-30s, handsome but with the air of a man who had long ago grown tired of waiting for his inheritance. His glass of brandy was already half empty. On the sofa near the window sat Dr. Leonard Phelps, the village physician and an old friend of the family. He looked slightly uncomfortable in the opulent setting, adjusting his spectacles every few minutes as if the grandeur of Ashford Manor demanded constant nervous acknowledgement. Beside him, knitting with deliberate concentration, was Mrs. Clara Whitmore, Sir Edmund's widowed sister. Though in her 60s, she retained a sharpness in her eyes that suggested she missed very little of what went on around her. Finally, by the bookshelf stood a striking young woman in her 20s, Miss Alice Trent, Lady Margaret's niece, who had come to live at the manor the previous year. Her presence was explained away as companionship for her aunt, though whispers in the village suggested otherwise. The gathering was a curious one, Reeves thought, though hardly unusual for a man like Sir Edmund. Family, dependents, and a few outsiders thrown into the mix, it was the perfect recipe for either a celebration or a quarrel. A few moments later, the door opened, and Sir Edmund himself strode in. At 72, he remained tall and commanding, his silver hair combed neatly back, his voice resonant with authority. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his gaze sweeping the room, "I thank you all for coming on such short notice. I assure you, the matter at hand is of the utmost importance." Edward gave a derisive snort. "Father, if this is about your will again—" "Silence, Edward," Sir Edmund interrupted sharply. "All will be explained in due time. But first, I must insist that everyone remain at Ashford Manor until the matter is concluded. Collins has prepared the guest rooms. No one is to leave until I have said what needs to be said." A murmur rippled through the group. Reeves frowned. Such dramatics rarely led to good outcomes. Before anyone could protest further, Sir Edmund continued, "Tonight, after dinner, I will reveal the truth that concerns every person in this room. Until then, I ask for your patience." And with that, he turned and left the room as swiftly as he had entered, leaving behind an air thick with unease. Dinner that evening was tense. The long oak table, glittering with silverware and crystal, did little to disguise the undercurrents among the guests. Edward drank more than he ate, casting frequent scowls at his stepmother, Lady Margaret, who in turn avoided his gaze entirely. Alice Trent spoke little, though her eyes seemed to follow Edward with something like sympathy. Dr. Phelps attempted small talk about the weather and the state of the village, but his efforts were met with silence more often than not. Sir Edmund presided at the head of the table, his expression unreadable. Several times he opened his mouth as if to begin his revelation, only to close it again, shaking his head slightly. When the final course was cleared, he stood, glass of port in hand. The room quieted immediately. "My friends," he began, "I have summoned you here tonight because the time has come to speak of matters long concealed. There are secrets within this family, secrets that, if left unspoken, will bring ruin to us all. Before this night is out, I will tell you everything." He paused, his eyes narrowing. "But first, I must fetch a document from my study. It will make the truth undeniable. Please, remain here." With that, he left the dining room. Minutes passed. The guests exchanged uneasy glances. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Collins the butler reappeared, his face pale. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said hoarsely, "forgive me, but Sir Edmund. Sir Edmund is dead." Gasps erupted around the table. "Dead?" Reeves demanded, rising to his feet. "How?" Collins's voice trembled. "In his study, sir. Stabbed. A letter opener straight through the heart." Lady Margaret let out a sharp cry and fainted in her chair. Edward slammed his fist on the table. "Murdered, here, in his own house." Dr. Phelps hurried from the room to confirm the butler's words. The others sat in stunned silence. Reeves, heart pounding, surveyed the faces around him. Fear. Shock. And, in some, perhaps even the faintest glimmer of something else. Yes, Reeves thought grimly, someone here had murdered Sir Edmund Ashford. And they were all trapped inside Ashford Manor until the truth was found. The discovery of Sir Edmund's body cast a suffocating pall over Ashford Manor. The storm outside raged on, rain pelting against the tall windows, as though the heavens themselves mourned or conspired with the grim fate inside. Dr. Phelps returned to the dining room within minutes, his face grim, his hands trembling slightly as he adjusted his spectacles. "There is no doubt," he said. "Sir Edmund is gone. The wound was fatal, a clean thrust to the heart. He would have died instantly." Lady Margaret, pale and shaking, clutched Alice Trent's hand for support. "But who could have done such a dreadful thing?" Edward Ashford rose to his feet, brandy glass in hand, his face flushed with a mixture of anger and alcohol. "Who?" he barked. "It could be anyone in this room. My father himself said he had secrets to reveal, secrets that threaten to ruin us all. And now, conveniently, before he can speak a word, he is silenced. Murdered." "Edward, sit down," Mrs. Whitmore snapped, her knitting needles clicking furiously. "Your bluster helps no one." Reeves cleared his throat. "We must proceed carefully. It is vital that no one leave the house until the authorities are called." At that moment, Collins the butler stepped forward, wringing his hands. "Forgive me, sir, but the telephone lines are down. The storm has damaged them. We cannot reach the village tonight." A heavy silence followed his words. "So we are trapped here," Reeves said gravely. "In a house with a murderer. They moved back into the drawing room, where the fire still burned low, casting flickering shadows across the assembled faces. No one spoke for several minutes. Each person seemed lost in thought or in fear. At last, Reeves said, "We must attempt to reconstruct the last half hour." Sir Edmund left us to fetch a document from his study. That was, 15 minutes before Collins found him. Collins nodded. "Yes, sir. I went to the study to see if Sir Edmund required anything. When he did not answer my knock, I entered. That is when I discovered him." "Was the door locked?" Reeves asked. "No, sir. It was ajar." Edward scowled. "So anyone could have gone in and killed him?" "The study is on the ground floor, not far from here." Reeves pressed further. "And where was each of us during that time?" The answers came reluctantly. Lady Margaret claimed she had remained in the dining room, too shaken by her husband's words to move. Alice confirmed that she had been with her aunt, trying to calm her. Edward admitted he had gone into the corridor to smoke a cigarette. "Ask Collins he saw me," he insisted. Collins hesitated, then nodded slowly. "I did see Mr. Edward in the corridor, sir. Near the smoking room." Mrs. Whitmore said she had returned to the drawing room to fetch her knitting. "A trivial errand, perhaps, but I assure you, I had no desire to chase after my brother. I've long grown weary of his theatrics. And I," Dr. Phelps added nervously, "remained with Mrs. Whitmore. I can vouch for her whereabouts." That left Collins himself. He looked startled when Reeves turned his gaze upon him. "I was preparing the port wine in the pantry," Collins said. "The kitchen maid can confirm it." Reeves frowned. Every alibi seemed fragile, overlapping, or unverifiable. It was as though the entire household had dissolved into shadows precisely when the murder occurred. Edward poured himself another drink and sneered. "This is absurd. Do you mean to suggest one of us murdered my father with our own hands? More likely he took his own life, stabbed himself, perhaps, to avoid revealing whatever nonsense he had planned." "No," Dr. Phelps said firmly. "The wound's angle and force make suicide highly improbable. This was no accident. It was murder." The word hung in the air like smoke. Reeves studied the group carefully. Agatha Christie herself, he thought, would have found this the perfect stage: a storm, a manor house, a family of uneasy relations, and now a corpse at the heart of it all. But this was no fiction. "Tell me," Reeves said slowly, "did anyone notice Sir Edmund behaving unusually these past days? Did he confide in anyone about the truth he intended to reveal tonight?" Lady Margaret shivered. "He was secretive of late. Often shut away in his study, writing letters. He burned several papers in the fireplace yesterday. I saw the ashes. When I asked him about it, he only said, 'All in good time, Margaret.'" "All in good time?" Alice nodded. "Yes, he received a letter 3 days ago. It seemed to upset him. I don't know from whom he kept it hidden." Mrs. Whitmore sniffed. "Edmund always thrived on drama. But I will admit he was restless. More so than usual." Reeves turned to Edward. "And you, sir, did your father confide anything in you?" Edward's jaw tightened. "He said nothing of importance. Only that after tonight, my future might not be as I expected. I assumed he was making yet another threat to alter his will." Lady Margaret gasped softly. "He did speak of his will recently. He hinted at changes. But he wouldn't say more. The implication was clear: money, inheritance, resentment. The oldest motives for murder in the world." Dash dash. Later that night, unable to rest, Reeves asked Collins to show him the study. The room was dimly lit, its curtains drawn against the storm. Sir Edmund's body had been covered respectfully with a sheet, but the dark stain on the carpet bore silent testimony to the violence that had occurred. On the desk lay scattered papers, but no document of apparent significance. A heavy brass letter opener, stained with blood, lay on the floor where it had fallen. Reeves crouched to examine it. The weapon was ornate, shaped like a dagger, the handle engraved with the Ashford family crest. His eyes moved to the desk drawers. One stood slightly open. Inside, Reeves found letters tied with a ribbon, mundane business correspondence, mostly. But one envelope, torn hastily, bore no signature. Only a few words were legible on the single sheet it contained: "The truth will ruin you. Best remain silent, or pay the price." A threat. Reeves felt a chill. Had Sir Edmund intended to expose something that someone desperately wanted kept hidden? As he straightened, Reeves noticed something else: muddy footprints on the carpet, faint but visible in the lamplight. They led from the window, which was unlatched, to the desk, and then back again. Had someone entered the study from outside or staged it to appear so? He made a mental note to keep this detail to himself, for now. Dash dash. Back in his guest room, Reeves lay awake long into the night, the storm battering against the windows. His mind replayed the evening's events again and again. Each guest had motive enough: Edward, impatient for his inheritance; Lady Margaret, fearing disinheritance; Alice, whose position in the household was tenuous at best; Mrs. Whitmore, bitter about old family grievances; even Dr. Phelps, perhaps privy to secrets best left unspoken. And beyond them, the loyal butler, Collins, who might not be as loyal as he appeared. Reeves exhaled. It was the perfect puzzle. A deadly puzzle. When at last he drifted into uneasy sleep, he dreamed of Sir Edmund rising from his grave, whispering, "Find the truth, Reeves, before the truth finds you." Morning broke reluctantly over Ashford Manor, the storm having left the countryside drenched and cloaked in a grey mist. Inside, the household stirred with unease rather than routine. Breakfast was a silent affair, each guest nursing tea or coffee as though it might ward off the dread that hung heavy in the dining hall. Jonathan Reeves observed them carefully as he buttered his toast without appetite. Sir Edmund's death had transformed them all into wary shadows of themselves. Edward was pale and hungover, his usual swagger dulled by a restless night. Lady Margaret avoided everyone's eyes, her hands trembling slightly whenever she lifted her cup. Alice looked drawn and weary, though she sat close to her aunt in a show of loyalty. Mrs. Whitmore knitted furiously, her needles clacking like a metronome of tension. Dr. Phelps dabbed his forehead with a handkerchief every few minutes, perspiration unbecoming in the chill of the room. Collins moved silently among them, refilling cups, clearing plates, his expression unreadable. Reeves could not decide whether the butler's composure was genuine or carefully rehearsed. When the meal concluded, Reeves cleared his throat. "Ladies and gentlemen, as we remain unable to reach the authorities, it falls to us to preserve the truth until help arrives. That means cooperation. No one leaves the manor, no one acts alone." "Agreed." Edward muttered into his coffee, "Agreed, though I see little point. The truth is obvious: my father was murdered because of his cursed secrecy. If you ask me, the sooner the will is read, the sooner we'll know who had the most to gain." "Your impatience for inheritance hardly helps your case," Mrs. Whitmore said coldly. Edward shot her a glare, but Reeves interjected, "Enough. Let us focus on facts, not accusations." Dash dash. Reeves decided to begin with the study. In the cold light of morning, the room revealed new details he had missed the night before. The footprints remained on the carpet, faint, but undeniable. The window was still unlatched. Outside lay the sodden garden, where the rain had erased all trace of movement. Collins stood by the doorway, wringing his hands. "I did not disturb anything after last night, sir. I thought it best to leave matters as they were." "Quite right," Reeves said. He pointed to the footprints. "Who has been in here recently whose shoes might leave such marks?" Collins peered at them nervously. "I cannot say, sir. They do not match my own, I am certain." Reeves crouched to examine more closely. The prints were narrow, suggesting a smaller foot. A woman's, perhaps. He glanced at Lady Margaret's dainty slippers, Alice's modest shoes, Mrs. Whitmore's sturdy heels. Any could fit. On the desk, he noticed something else, a ledger, half buried beneath loose papers. Opening it, Reeves found columns of numbers, financial records of Ashford Manor. And within them, a curious detail, repeated withdrawals of large sums over the past year, all marked simply private. Sir Edmund was moving money, Reeves murmured. But for what purpose? Dash dash. By mid-morning, Reeves gathered the household in the drawing room. He felt like a reluctant detective on stage, but necessity demanded it. "Last night," he began, "I found a note among Sir Edmund's papers. It contained a threat that the truth would ruin him, and he had best remain silent. Clearly, someone here did not want his revelation exposed." Gasps and murmurs filled the room. Lady Margaret pressed a hand to her throat. "A threat, my God, from whom?" "That is what we must determine," Reeves said. "But let me ask you this, did Sir Edmund confide in any of you about debts, blackmail, or secrets concerning the family?" Edward sneered. "He confided nothing in me, though it seems he was bleeding the estate dry with whatever nonsense he was up to." Mrs. Whitmore pursed her lips. "I know only that Edmund always had a weakness for women. It would not surprise me if some old scandal had come to haunt him." Alice flushed slightly at her aunt's bluntness but said nothing. Dr. Phelps shifted uncomfortably. "I cannot speak to financial matters, but Sir Edmund did consult me about his health. He feared his heart might fail him. Perhaps the murderer relied on that fear, thinking the death would pass as natural." "But a knife in the heart is hardly natural," Reeves replied sharply. The room fell silent again. Dash dash. That afternoon, Reeves requested a private word with Alice Trent. They walked together through the misty gardens, though Reeves kept an eye on her expression. "You were close to Sir Edmund, were you not?" Reeves asked gently. Alice hesitated. "He was kind to me. Kinder than most. He treated me almost like a daughter." "Why do you ask?" "Because last night, you mentioned a letter he received days ago. Did you see it?" She bit her lip. "Only briefly. It was written in a hurried hand. I couldn't read much, but the words betrayal and justice stood out. He grew very agitated after reading it. He locked himself in his study for hours." "Do you think he feared someone in this household?" Reeves pressed. Alice lowered her gaze. "Perhaps. Or perhaps he feared what he himself had done would come to light." Her words lingered in Reeves's mind long after they parted. Dash dash. By evening, tensions had frayed further. Edward grew increasingly belligerent, pacing the drawing room like a caged lion. Lady Margaret wept openly, clutching Alice's hand as though it were the only anchor keeping her steady. Mrs. Whitmore continued knitting, her eyes sharp as daggers. Dr. Phelps attempted to soothe everyone with assurances that the storm would soon pass, the lines restored, the authorities summoned. Then Collins entered quietly and said, "Mr. Reeves, I believe you should see something. At once." Reeves followed him to the library, where Collins produced a folded sheet of paper. "I found this beneath the carpet near Sir Edmund's desk," the butler said. Reeves unfolded it. The handwriting was unmistakably Sir Edmund's. The note read, "Tonight, I reveal the truth. One among us is not who they claim to be. Their deception has gone on too long. The time for masks is over." Reeves felt a chill. The letter was unfinished, abruptly cut short. Perhaps Sir Edmund had been interrupted or silenced before he could complete it. "One among us," Reeves whispered. "Not who they claim to be." He looked up sharply at Collins. "Tell me truthfully, did anyone new enter this household in recent years?" Collins hesitated. "Only Miss Alice, sir, when she came to live with Lady Margaret. Otherwise, the household has been unchanged." Reeves folded the letter slowly, his mind racing. Alice, could it be dash dash? That night, the manor seemed to breathe unease. Every creak of the old house echoed like footsteps. Reeves sat awake in the drawing room, staring into the fire, pondering the note's meaning. One among us is not who they claim to be. It could apply to anyone. Perhaps Edward was not the heir he believed himself to be. Perhaps Lady Margaret's marriage was built on deceit. Perhaps Dr. Phelps's loyalty concealed darker motives. Perhaps even Collins, ever faithful, was not what he seemed. A sudden sound broke his thoughts, a faint cry from upstairs. Reeves leapt to his feet and hurried toward the staircase, followed by the others roused from their rooms. At the top of the stairs, they found Alice, trembling, pointing toward the corridor. Someone was in my room. I woke and saw a shadow. They fled when I screamed." Edward cursed. Lady Margaret clutched Alice protectively. Mrs. Whitmore muttered, "The murderer grows bold." Reeves examined the corridor. The carpet was old, worn, but faint impressions suggested hurried footsteps leading away toward the servants' wing. When he returned, Alice was still shaking. "I swear it was no dream," she whispered. "Someone wanted to frighten me, or silence me." Reeves believed her. And as he looked around at the pale, watchful faces of the household, he realized one thing with certainty: the murderer was desperate. And the truth Sir Edmund had threatened to reveal was closer to surfacing than ever. The following morning dawned bleak and silent. The storm had at last passed, but its aftermath left the countryside washed pale beneath a dim sky. Inside Ashford Manor, the air was thick with exhaustion, fear, and something darker: the knowledge that a murderer still moved among them. Jonathan Reeves had slept little. Instead, he had pieced together fragments of evidence: the threatening note, the unfinished letter, the muddy footprints, the financial records. Each detail hinted at something, yet the whole remained elusive. By mid-morning, he summoned the household to the drawing room. The atmosphere resembled a tribunal: Lady Margaret pale and fragile, Edward tense and restless, Alice subdued, Mrs. Whitmore stern, Dr. Phelps perspiring, Collins solemn. Reeves stood before the fireplace, hands clasped behind his back. "Ladies and gentlemen, last night I promised myself that by today, the truth would be known. Sir Edmund's death was no accident, nor was it the work of some intruder. The murderer is among us." Gasps and murmurs rippled through the room. Edward sneered. "We know that already. What we want is a name." Reeves's gaze swept over them. "Patience, Mr. Ashford. For the truth is layered, and the motives run deep. He began slowly, laying out the facts as though arranging chess pieces. First, the muddy footprints in the study. They were narrow, not a man's, but likely a woman's. That suggested Lady Margaret, Alice, or Mrs. Whitmore. Yet the footprints were deliberately smudged, as though intended to confuse us. Too deliberate. I believe they were planted. Lady Margaret gasped. Mrs. Whitmore sniffed. Alice looked down at her hands. Second, Reeves continued, the financial records. Sir Edmund had been withdrawing large sums of money for months. Why not for gambling, nor for investments? The amounts were regular, precise payments, I believe, to keep someone quiet. He lifted the ledger. Someone in this very room was blackmailing him. A sharp intake of breath came from Lady Margaret. Blackmail from whom? Reeves's voice was steady. We come to the third clue, the unfinished letter Sir Edmund began. One among us is not who they claim to be. That was no metaphor. Sir Edmund had discovered a deception once so grave it threatened the family name. He turned slowly, his eyes falling on Alice. Miss Trent, perhaps you would care to explain. Alice stiffened. Explain, what do you mean? Reeves stepped closer. You arrived at Ashford Manor a year ago, introduced as Lady Margaret's niece. Yet no records of your parentage exist in the parish, nor any mention of your family. You slipped into this household as though from nowhere. Why? All eyes turned to Alice. Her lips parted, then closed. Her hands trembled in her lap. She began, but Reeves cut her off. Sir Edmund had learned the truth. You are not Lady Margaret's niece at all. You are his illegitimate daughter. The room erupted. Lady Margaret cried out. Edward shouted, lies. Dr. Phelps dropped his handkerchief. Mrs. Whitmore's needles froze mid-stitch. Alice's face drained of color. At last, she whispered, it's true. Reeves's voice rang clear. Years ago, Sir Edmund had an affair. You were the result, Alice. Your mother raised you in obscurity, but when she died, you sought your rightful place. Sir Edmund took you in under a false identity, to save his wife humiliation. But Edward would never accept an illegitimate half-sister as competition for inheritance. Edward sprang to his feet, brandy glass smashing to the floor. This is outrageous. She has no claim. None. But Sir Edmund intended otherwise, Reeves said firmly. That is why he called us together. He meant to reveal Alice's true identity and to change his will accordingly. Lady Margaret sobbed. So the truth he wished to tell, was about her. Yes, Reeves said. And someone murdered him to stop it? Reeves's gaze hardened. Edward Ashford, all evidence points to you. You had the strongest motive. You overheard your father's intention. You knew your inheritance would vanish into Alice's hands. You left the dining room on the pretext of smoking, which gave you opportunity. And you had knowledge of the study's layout, the letter opener, everything. Edward's face twisted. That proves nothing. You cannot place the weapon in my hand. Reeves's voice was calm, precise. But I can. The footprints in the study were meant to mislead us into suspecting a woman. Yet when I examined the carpet closely, I saw faint traces of tobacco ash near the desk. Not just any ash, but the distinctive blend you smoke, Mr. Ashford. Turkish tobacco. None other here smokes it? You were in that study. And you killed your father. The room fell into stunned silence. Edward's face grew ashen, then hardened with defiance. He deserved it? That old man, always lording over us, and then to disgrace me with some bastard daughter. No, I would not allow it. Lady Margaret gasped. Alice covered her face with her hands. Mrs. Whitmore whispered, "So it was you." Edward laughed bitterly. "What would you have had me do?" Watch as he handed everything to her, his little secret child. "No, I made sure his secret died with him." Dash dash. Reeves straightened. "But it did not die. Because you failed to reckon with the truth itself. Sir Edmund left behind his letters, his accounts, his confessions. And now you have confessed with your own tongue. When the authorities arrive, justice will be served." Edward looked around wildly, then made a dash for the door. But Collins, surprisingly strong for his age, stepped forward and blocked his path. "No further, sir," the butler said firmly. Defeated, Edward sank into a chair, his head in his hands. Dash dash. The hours that followed passed in a haze. Collins finally managed to repair the telephone line, and the police were summoned from the village. Edward Ashford was taken away under guard, protesting bitterly but to no avail. The remaining household sat in silence, the weight of revelation settling over them. Lady Margaret wept quietly. All these years of lies, deceit, and for what? Mrs. Whitmore laid aside her knitting at last. For pride. For greed. It is always the same. Alice, pale and shaken, approached Reeves. "Thank you," she whispered. "Without you, the truth might have died with him." Reeves looked at her gravely. "The truth is seldom easy, Miss Trent. But it is better born than buried. Your father meant to acknowledge you at last. In that, at least, you may take some comfort." Alice nodded, tears in her eyes. Dash dash. That evening, as Reeves prepared to depart, he paused at the great doors of Ashford Manor. The rain had stopped, and the air smelled of wet earth and renewal. Collins stood beside him. "Will you return to London now, sir?" "Yes," Reeves said quietly. "This house has had enough of my presence and enough of death. But I dare say the story of Sir Edmund Ashford will linger in these walls for many years." He glanced back at the darkened hall, where the family portraits seemed to watch him with solemn eyes. Then he stepped out into the misty countryside, the weight of the manor fading behind him. For Reeves knew that though justice would come for Edward, the true punishment had already been delivered. The legacy of Ashford Manor was forever stained by betrayal, murder, and a secret too long concealed. And in that silence, the house itself seemed to sigh.